This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Professor Judyth Sachs, former PVC Learning and Teaching at the University of Sydney, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost at Macquarie University, and Special Advisor in Higher Education at KPMG, and now Chief Academic Officer at Studiosity. Welcome.
It gives me great pleasure this morning to talk to Professor Neil Quigley, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Waikato. Neil, I noticed that this year you will celebrate 10 years at the helm of Waikato. But to get there, it's been quite an interesting journey, both in Canada, various New Zealand universities. So can you just briefly describe your journey as a learner and a leader? And you can do that through your object that I asked you to bring to the conversation.
Okay, thank you. It's my pleasure to be talking to you this morning, Judyth. So my journey, yes, it is at the moment 10 years since I was appointed here at the University of Waikato as the Vice-Chancellor. And that journey began at the University of Canterbury in the late 1970s, and then after a master's degree at the University of Canterbury, a PhD at the University of Toronto. And following the completion of my PhD, or almost completion, I was appointed to a position back in New Zealand. Came back to New Zealand for 5 years and confess that I didn't really like it. I was rather shocked to find the state of New Zealand universities after what I'd experienced at the University of Toronto. And so at the end of 5 years, I took a job back in Canada at the University of Western Ontario. That was another 5 years, I think, before I found my way back to New Zealand, and then a reasonably long stint at Victoria University in Wellington before coming here to Waikato. And in my stint at Victoria, I think I had 4 different leadership jobs over around 15 years while I was there. So the object that I've brought with me this morning is behind me and over my right shoulder as I see it. It's the certificate that I was given to receive an honorary doctorate from the University of Economics in Vietnam. And this was in some ways the culmination of more or less a decade of working in Vietnam for Victoria University of Wellington. We built a joint venture campus in Ho Chi Minh City that was quite successful in its time. And in that context, building the relationship with the University of Economics in Ho Chi Minh City, who were the host of the campus, caused me to embark on the challenge of learning to speak the Vietnamese language. And that was probably the most difficult and challenging thing that I've ever tried to do. Vietnamese language has 6 tones, and it is full of consonant and vowel sounds that don't exist in English. So it is a real challenge to speak it in any way that is easily comprehensible to the Vietnamese people. Most Westerners speaking Vietnamese, the Vietnamese can guess what they're trying to say, but they don't in a natural way understand it because of the complexity of the language. So I embarked on that challenge, and probably my acceptance speech for the honorary doctorate, which I gave entirely in Vietnamese, was the pinnacle of my learning of that language, and something that I'm really proud of. There are of course, a reasonable number of Westerners who've learned to speak Vietnamese reasonably well as I have, but it is a challenging thing to do. Also significant for my leadership journey back in New Zealand, because I realized that for native speakers of English, one of our biggest problems in learning another language is that we have very poor listening skills. So we don't hear what the speakers of other languages are actually saying. And as a result of that experience learning Vietnamese, what I realized was my learning skills improved substantially, but particularly my listening skills were substantially better after that experience. And so more recently, I have taken up the challenge of becoming proficient in Te Reo Māori. And I do reflect on the fact that there are some similarities in the Vietnamese and the Māori language, because they both have their origins in the south of China. But the learning of the Māori language has been much easier for me because of the skills I acquired learning Vietnamese 15 years ago.
So what did you mentioned that you actually learned to be a better listener, but what else did you learn about yourself as a learner?
I learned that I had the ability really to persevere when I needed to, and when I had the right motivation to do it, with something that was a little bit outside of the standard for a leader. The experience I had when I actually was taking formal Vietnamese lessons was that I hired a teacher who came to my apartment every morning from 8 until 12, while my wife and children went out and explored Ho Chi Minh City. So for 4 hours, it was just me and the teacher. And of course, if I hadn't done the preparation that I was supposed to have done the night before, there was nowhere to hide. And it was a very humbling experience to feel so inadequate, I suppose, in the context of a teacher who was there to help me, but nonetheless who knew so much more about the area of study than I did.
So you started your life as an economist, and you are still known as an economist. You have a very extraordinary reputation in your economics, and you've made a considerable contribution to New Zealand economic policy through your Reserve bankroll. How has your thinking as an economist shaped your leadership approach to a university, and in particular to sort of navigate and manage the challenges that are facing universities at the moment?
Well, yes, I think my experience as an economist is relevant to the work that I do as a leader. My interest in economics is partly in macroeconomics because of the relevance of that to the financial sector and to banking. But a lot of the work that I did in economics was in microeconomics, and was particularly concerned with incentives and actions and responses by individuals and markets. So that's a background that I bring to the way I analyze problems and the things that I do as a Vice-Chancellor. But of course, the leadership context for a Vice-Chancellor, but I think for any organizational leader, requires that you have those sort of analytical skills. But of course, you need so much more to be a successful leader in an organizational context in the modern environment. When
you reflect on your experience as a student, both in Canterbury, but then when you did a PhD at Toronto, what were the things that come to mind in terms of that experience, both as an undergraduate and a postgraduate student?
The things that I remember most strongly are associated with people. So I strongly believe that I'm here today because I had the opportunity to meet and to work with some quite extraordinary people on that journey. People who challenged me, who opened my eyes to ways of thinking about things that I'd never even conceived of before, and then people who encouraged me to continue on the journey. So at the University of Canterbury, neither of my parents had been to university, indeed not completed high school. So their idea of what I should do with my life was that I should be a teacher. That was their idea of status in the world. And so initially my plan was to be a secondary school teacher. And in the context of completing my undergraduate degree, I met a professor at the university named Eric Pawson, who became a huge influence on what I did and encouraged me both to continue and complete a master's degree and then to look at completing a PhD. And in particular, Eric was the influence on going to Canada or the US. I remember him still very clearly saying, the forefront of the discipline these days is in North America. That's where you have to go to do your PhD. And I'll show you how to apply to different places so that you have a chance of doing that.
And he was right.
Yes, no, he definitely was. I mean, that was so formative, so challenging for my parents, who had just imagined, that I would complete a degree, become a school teacher, and stay in Christchurch. The making of my life, really. The University of Toronto, of course, is an extraordinary institution, amazing people that I met there. And of course, I also met my wife there as a fellow graduate student initially. So that was formative as well.
So when you think about your experience at Western in Ontario and then Victoria University in now Waikato, what have you learned about the nature of higher education, but also the challenges facing a Vice-Chancellor?
Well, I think that the challenges facing a Vice-Chancellor are many, and I like to keep, though, taking it back to what it is that creates a vibrant academic culture at the front line of an institution. And while I saw some of that as a PhD student at the University of Toronto, it was actually at Western Ontario that, or Western as it is now, that I particularly learned what it was like to be a part of a really high-performing academic unit. The economics department at Western was a very high-flying group at the time that I was fortunate enough to be there. And it was an environment that was full of challenge. So that the junior academic staff members saw it as their job to show why the senior members of the faculty didn't really know what they were talking about, and to guide them on the sort of appointments they should make. It was an environment where people would give you really forthright feedback on your work. And I remember in one instance very clearly, someone who was one of the stars of the department at the time, listening patiently in my office while I described a project that I was working on. And then when he asked me, well, where are you going to publish this paper? And I told him what I thought I where I would send it first, he stood up and he said, well, you can't expect people here to take you seriously if you're going to publish in journals like that. And he left my office. But, you know, he was right. So that experience of being in an environment where the expectations and the standards were so high was really formative for me. And I think now, you know, as a Vice-Chancellor, you look at the challenge we have in a university system that is not growing in the way that it was, say, in the 1980s. And you say, well, so how is it that the existing staff in an academic program get that level of challenge if we're not able to keep hiring bright new PhD graduates who come in and want to prove that all the existing professors really aren't up with the frontier of the discipline. You know, it is a challenge in the current environment to maintain that level of academic vibrance in the life of each of the different discipline areas, as the numbers have been static for some years now.
Most of the people that listen to this podcast probably haven't been to Hamilton, and they don't know much about the University of Waikato. I first went to Hamilton when I was 17 playing netball, and I've never been so cold in all my life. It's quite an extraordinary location. But Waikato University, I also went there as a visiting professor. Tell us about Waikato and where it fits in the New Zealand system.
Waikato was one of the newer universities created in New Zealand, so established in 1964. Its initial claim to fame was that it's a university that the people in the city of Hamilton wanted, but that the New Zealand government did not want to create. And so there was a battle over quite a period of time with the local community wanting a university and the government resisting, until finally the government did give in and agree to its creation. The university then spent quite a long period of time thinking of itself as having a relatively local mandate. So as a regional university, I think many people saw it. And that, of course, was the period in which a lot of students did study locally, and there was not the same sense of students at universities being willing to enroll in any university across the country. Whereas now, the universities operate in a world in which many of our students are free to choose any university in New Zealand, and they move very freely around the country. And that's brought with it the challenge for the University of Waikato to stop thinking of itself as a regional university and to become more explicitly a national brand. The challenge with being a regional university when the market is national is that the other universities attempt to recruit the top students out of this area. And of course, they are successful with some. So if we are not out there looking to recruit students from across the country who have a particular interest in things where this university has real excellence, then we're not serving well the students from the local region, and we're not serving the country in the way that we should. So part of what I've done as Vice-Chancellor is to lead a much more self-conscious effort for this university to be a player on the national stage.
So if you and I met up and you took me for a trip around, a walk around campus, what would we see together?
We'd see something that is quite unique in New Zealand terms, and I think internationally. The first thing that you would notice probably is the diversity of the student body. So 26% of this university students are Māori, and another 9% are of Pacific origin. Hamilton now has a reasonably substantial refugee population, so we have a lot of students from the Middle East, from Ethiopia, from Somalia, etc. And so the university just has an amazing multicultural feel about it, which I think is very, very nice aspect of our culture. It's nice, particularly because everyone at this university thinks that's the natural order of things. So no one thinks it's a surprise that the student community is as diverse as it is here. Another thing that you'd find about this university as we walked around the campus, which is a little unusual, we're still at the scale where people know who I am. And in addition, because we draw quite a lot of students who come from provincial towns and have been to provincial high schools, those students come to the university and when they find out who I am, they treat me like I was principal of a high school. So when we wander around, you will find students saying to me, "Oh, hello, sir, how are you today?" In a way that, I think is quite extraordinary, because there's no other university where I've been where that could happen. So what I like about this university is, that sense of community, of friendly and nature, of warmth, and a scale that is human, where people know each other, and where, while I don't know everyone on the academic staff of the university, I know a very high proportion of them.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the sort of the uniqueness of the Waikato graduate?
We've attempted to emphasize a number of things, and so one is cultural perspective, so that every student from this university emerges with an understanding of what it is to operate in contemporary New Zealand society and is comfortable with that. So around the university, we don't just encourage students to take papers that broaden their perspective, but the whole physical infrastructure of the university is designed to normalize different cultural perspectives, and in particular, to make the students feel that the Māori language and tikanga Māori, Māori protocol, Māori culture, if you like, is integrated into everything that the university does. We've also emphasized support for learner success, and I think this university has gone a long way to establish the sort of support for students that ensures, particularly when we get a lot of first and family learners, how to support them to succeed at the university. And then thirdly, how to support them to think about the career that they will have when they finish their university experience. So now every student in the university including the arts and social science students, has to do at least one paper equivalent of work integrated learning. And that's very much about ensuring that every student is thinking about how their university experience equips them for the world of work that they'll confront when they graduate.
So it sounds as though it's a very rounded personal and professional, but also experiential approach to learning at Waikato.
That's our aim. It is to produce students who are really well-rounded and who are ready for the challenges that our contemporary world will throw at them. And they are, of course, substantial.
This week represents 5 years since the pandemic started. And that was one of those sort of inflection points where universities had to respond quickly. But when you think about what's happened in that 5 years, particularly around advanced AI, what do you think the future of AI is in a university, or generative AI is within the university experience of students, but also around issues of integrity?
Obviously, artificial intelligence provides real challenges for our traditional ways of thinking about assessment in universities and learning. It's not going to go away though, so we're going to have to learn to deal with those challenges. And indeed, if you think about it in a traditional vein, the challenges will only get greater because the artificial intelligence models will only get better at replicating human writing, human ways of thinking, and supporting students who want to let a computer do their thinking for them. So the challenge for us is to ensure that we are adapting our assessment so that we can identify the contribution that students are making. And what that's going to mean is, we simply can't rely on essays and on tests that students can do at home, but we're going to need to be engaging much more with project work and changing that more frequently so that the model project is not available on the internet or for an AI algorithm to find. And we're going to have to keep adapting what we do. We don't have the resources to go back to individual student assessments of a verbal type, but we need to keep developing project-based and interactive-based assessments that are going to make it easy for us to identify that students have actually learned the material that we need them to learn.
So when you look at the literature, it's on a sort of a continuum of learning and productivity. And all too often people focus on the productivity. What I'm hearing you say is the focus is on learning. And how do you know students have learned something?
That's right. If the students have learned something, and particularly something useful, then that is productivity, and they will be productive members of our society when they leave the university as well. So yes, the challenge for universities is that, of course, we are under pressure to manage higher student load with the same or less money. That pressure is not going to go away. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we are producing students who know how to think, who still have the traditional enthusiasm for being challenged, for new knowledge, for being creative. And it's that human creativity that we can inculcate in our students, that is something that artificial intelligence will find it extremely difficult to replicate.
I've got two more questions and then a quirky question as the very last question. So, reflecting back on your career, which has been remarkable, what advice would you give to the younger Neil?
I think that I did too many things that I didn't quite complete. And so for academics, there are always, papers that you wrote but didn't quite finish to the point where you could send them to a journal. In my career, there were other things that I allowed myself to engage with, and then didn't take through to a point of completion in any sense. So the curiosity that drove me to do all those different things, even the ones I didn't complete, meant that I learned a lot as part of that process. But perhaps I would advise my younger self to do slightly fewer things and make sure that all of them got completed.
I think many of us would have that reflection too. You use the word curiosity. To what extent can you embed curiosity, both as a disposition but also as a process, within the university experience?
I think you can embed curiosity in the university experience, because a key part of the skill of a university teacher is taking something that students have some vague familiarity with and showing them why their current knowledge of that issue is inadequate, and how much more they could understand about it if they had the opportunity to explore it in the way that, say, as a teacher, I'm trying to get them to do. I'll give you one concrete example from my many years teaching the core economics course in the MBA program. So a lot of the students in the MBA program are naturally a bit concerned about economics and the technical content that it might contain, and whether they really want to learn some of those things. So one of my favorite examples was in explaining to them about the ways in which economists think about pricing. So if any of them are going to own a business, they will have to think about different ways of pricing the goods and services that they're trying to sell. So economics has a huge literature on thinking about different ways to best address the market, to maximize profits with different strategies, using different approaches to pricing. And I invariably found in that teaching that people who were wary of engaging with the economics course for a start quickly saw the point when I could show them how much curiosity about the way economists thought about pricing could help them in a very practical way with the businesses they hope to have in the future.
You mentioned, we talked about walking around campus and talking to students. You've been to many graduations. You've said the congratulations, you must be very proud. I remember doing that at least 400 times. What advice do you give to young students now when you either meet them wandering around campus or at graduations?
Well, the advice I give to students when I meet them around the campus, if they ask, and sometimes I do get asked about the choices they're making and which discipline to study or whatever, and I invariably advise them simply to study what they are most interested in, and to rely on the fact that if they are enthusiastic about that study and they follow the path of curiosity through that discipline, then something interesting will emerge for them to do once they graduate, and they don't need to worry about that. At graduations, yes, of course, graduations are a very formal ceremony. I try very hard to keep up with the reading of the names so that each student whose hand I shake or certificate I pass over, I can address the student by their given name. I'm always keen to encourage students to come back and do more study if they feel able to do that, because you know, the joys of an undergraduate degree are really that it opens up the possibility of doing more study in the future at a higher level if they choose to do that.
So my last question, which is a bit cheeky, is what are you reading at the moment for pleasure?
Yes, I'll give you sort of two answers, which shows the diversity of the things I tackle. So with Netflix making a series out of the novel 100 Years of Solitude, I read something about that either in the Economist or the New York Times that said some people thought 100 Years of Solitude was the greatest novel ever written. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, gosh, I've never heard of it. So sounds like something I should read. So over Christmas, I read 100 Years of Solitude, quite a challenging story, but an amazing story full of rich analogies and complexity of extraordinary human characters. So I tackled that, and then currently, because I also like to consume some biography, I'm reading the biography of Pamela Churchill, Winston Churchill's daughter-in-law, and a famous concubine and friends of the powerful and elite, both in the UK and in the US, and so that's part political history, part human interest, part all sorts of things, and a fascinating read. So I'm about 3/4 of the way through that at the moment.
I too have read that, and it's quite some life.
It is indeed. Imagine.
Yeah, thank you for giving me 45 minutes of your time today. I've really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed catching up with you. And I hope that at some stage our paths do cross, because you know, one shouldn't not take up an opportunity of having, you know, another conversation if that's possible.
Judyth, I'd love to. Thanks. It's been a pleasure, and really good to talk to you again.
You have been listening to Studiosity's podcast, Reimagining Higher Education, candid conversations within higher education, sharing stories of leadership, change, and best practice in teaching and learning. Visit studiosity.com.